Hello, beautiful people, and welcome. This is our notes for foundational math. We're going to be talking about everything slope and introduction to graphing lines. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to review is slope. I'm just going to write that here. Now, there are different types of identifying the slope. So if we have a slope and given to us is a graph, something like this, and we have a line, or you can even have points, but typically you'd have a line because you want the slope of a line. Let's say here and here. So you have a line and you have 2 points. So, and the question, if the question is asking you to find the slope, then you need to use what we call rise over run. In my class, we do up down, and then we do left right. So depending on the direction that you go will depend on if something is positive or negative. If it's up, you have a positive value. If it's down, you have a negative. If it's left, you have a negative. And if it's right, you have a positive. So for example, if we have something like this, you're going to choose a point. It doesn't matter which point you choose, but if you choose a point, stick with that point. For example, I'm going to choose this point here, and I'm going to count how many jumps it takes me to get to the height of this other point. So for example, I'm going to see how many jumps. And so this is 1 jump, 2 jumps, 3 jumps, 4 jumps. So it takes me 4 jumps to go up. And then I have to do, let's see how many jumps. And then I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps left. Okay. So I do 4 jumps up, 5 jumps left. So for our slope, we have up or down. So we have up, so that's going to be positive. What is the quantity? We are going up 4, and then we are going left 5. So left is minus, so minus 5. Now you can write your slope as 4 over negative 5, or you can write your slope as negative 4 fifths this way. As long as you still have one negative, one here and one here, it doesn't matter where your negative goes initially. Typically what you're going to see is something like this, so the negative out in front. Okay, that is what you do to identify your slope given a graph. Now we will not always provide the graph for you. Sometimes we only give you the points. So if you're trying to find the slope, but given to you are 2 points, for example, x1, y1, and x2, y2. You have these 2 points, and it's asking you to find the slope. You need to use what we call the slope formula. And the slope formula is lowercase m, which is equal to y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Okay. And so once you have your formula, you can then take your 2 points that are given and do and identify your slope or find the slope. So let's do an example. Let's do something with a negative. So let's do negative 3, 5, and 4, negative 8. Okay, so step number 1 is always to label your point. And what I mean by that is, if you notice up here, we have x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing underneath here. So I have x1, y1, x2, y2. After you have labeled your points, go and rewrite the formula. So at lowercase m is equal to, what I call this a big division sign. You have a line, a big line, and then 2 little minuses. To me, it looks like a big division sign, but you don't have to call it that. So x2 minus x1. Okay, now I'm going to redo that, but instead of writing my x1 or y2, I'm actually going to put in the values, the numeric values. So what I mean by that is I have a y2 in this bubble, and I'm looking for a y2. Here it is. And what's on top of that? -8. So inside this bubble goes -8. And I'm going to keep doing that for all of my bubbles. So inside this bubble, I have a y1. I'm looking for y1. Here it is. That's a 5. Inside this bubble is x2. It is 4. Excuse me. Yeah, you're right. x2. And then x1 is -3. Okay. Now we're here. Now we have to simplify. So immediately I'm kind of doing a little dance here because I'm noticing that I have two negatives. If you have two negatives that you can circle without crossing out any numbers, that means it is a positive. Now I cannot do the same thing here because if I was to circle these two negatives, 8 would be crossed out and so it doesn't work. So after you have these, I'm going to say use counters. Okay, so for my numerator, I have -8, so I have -8 and I have 5 negatives. So I have 8 minuses and 5 minuses. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in my numerator, what's the quantity of minuses? What's the quantity of pluses? In this case, I have only 8. Just kidding. How many negatives do I have? How many minuses? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I have 13 total minuses in my numerator. And then on the bottom, I have 4 plus 3. Now, you can just do 4 plus 3 using your fingers. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7. Or if you want to use counters, you still can use counters. And the way to do that is you're looking at the sign in front. So for example, 4, nothing is in front, so that means it's a positive or a plus. So I have 4 pluses and 3 pluses. So 4 pluses, 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 more pluses, 1, 2, 3. What's the total of that? Total of that is 7 pluses. If you can simplify this fraction, go ahead and do it. If you cannot, just leave it. Don't convert it, just keep it. So then this right here is our slope, and we identify that as a lowercase m, okay? Those are two different ways to find slope. Now, I want to mention something before we move on, talking more about slope, is whenever we're using our counters, so reminder. So when using counters, only cross out or circle like, let me not call them like terms because that's incorrect. We call them zero pairs. Okay, so remember a zero pair is a plus and a minus together. So in plus and minus, this equals 0, so we can get rid of it. Okay, but only if you have a plus and minus. For example, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives and 2 positives, then I would take 1 zero pair, cross it out, and I would take 2 zero pairs, cross them out. So what's left over? This is -2 left over. Now, let's say we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives and 3 negatives. There are no zero pairs, so we just count. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 what? What is this sign? What counters did we use? We used the minus counters. And the same thing, very similar with pluses, okay? Just wanted to remind you so you don't accidentally start cancel things out when you can't cancel. Only cancel when you have a plus and a minus that you can circle. All right, so we have gone over slope given a graph. We have also gone over how to find your slope given 2 points. And then so let's go ahead and ask you to find the slope given an equation of a line, okay? I'm gonna turn to the next page. All right, let me actually get a separate sheet of paper so you don't see what's underneath. All right, so given a line in slope-intercept form. Now remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. M is your slope, plus b is your y-intercept. Okay, so y-intercept is a point. So that means it is 0, comma, b, or whatever number that is. So 0, comma, number. So whatever this number, you put it here. Okay, so then if you have, for example, you have an equation that is y equals 4/3 x minus 5. And the question is asking you to identify your slope and y-intercept. So all you have to do is look at the number in front of x. That is going to be your slope. So m is equal to 4/3. And then if it's asking for your y-intercept, this is going to be your y-intercept. And recall, this is how we write a y-intercept. So we need to write 0, comma, number, and this is the number that we write. So 0, comma, -5 is our y-intercept. Okay, let's do another example. Let's do something that's a little bit more difficult. So example 2. Okay, for example 2, we're going to do something a little bit more difficult. So let's do y equals x, that's an x, minus, let's do plus 4. So again, anything that comes after x in this format is your y-intercept. So 0, comma, number, which is 0, comma, 4. That's your y-intercept. Now, anything that comes before the number in front of x, and that is your slope. But if you look here, there is no number in front of x. It's kind of hidden. We always say in my class that mathematicians are what? Lazy. We are lazy. So if it's something that's super duper common and we don't have to write it to make sense, then we don't write it. So for example, in here, there is a hidden 1. So this is a secret, like a mathematical secret. So anything in front of a variable, so anything in front of a letter is actually being multiplied by 1 if there is no other number. So since we have a 1 in front of there, so you can do 1 over 1, or you can do just 1. It is up to you. I'm going to slope is 1 over 1 or just 1. Doesn't matter in the case of our class. Typically, what you would see is just 1. Now let's do example number 3. Very similarly, I'm going to do y equals -x minus 3/4. Okay? Number in front of x, number behind x. So this right here is our y-intercept. Again, it is 0, comma, b, or 0, comma, number. And that number in this case is -3/4. So our y-intercept is 0, comma, -3/4 when it's asking for the y-intercept. And now the number in front of x. Okay, again, mathematicians are what? We are lazy. So if it's something that's common, we don't really common, and we can get away with not doing it, we will not do it. For example, there is no number in front of x. So there is a secret 1 times x. So then what's the number in front of x? That number is -1, or you can say -1 over 1. Typically what you're going to see is this number here as slope, m equals -1. But if you need to graph the line, you will use this one here. So I'm going to say use when graphing. Okay, all right. All right, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to shift to some graph paper so that way it can help us graph You should have some graph paper in front of you. So we talked about how to identify slope given a graph. We talked about how to identify slope given 2 points. We also talked about identifying slope while given an equation of a line. So now we're actually going to go a little bit in reverse. So now instead of graphing, we're actually going to, instead of writing an equation, let me try this again for the third time. Instead of identifying the information and just doing nothing with it, we will actually graph a line. Okay, so let's do example number 1. How to graph a line. Graphing a line given an equation in slope-intercept form. Almost ran out of room there. Okay, so let's say we have an equation. Example. We have an equation that says y equals 1/3 x minus 5. So step number 1 is to identify your y-intercept. Okay, remember from our previous example, y-intercept is always going to be the number after your x. Slope is going to be the number before x. So this is the number after x. So that means, remember, this means 0, b or 0, number, which is -5. So 0, -5. So when it says identify the slope, it's going to be 0, -5 for this example. Okay, step number 1, done. We identified the slope. Excuse me, I keep calling it slope. Y-intercept. Y-intercept. This is our y-intercept. Okay, step number 2. I'm going to repeat that. Step number 2 is identify slope. So step number 2, identify slope. Remember, slope is the number in front of x. If there is no number in front of x, it is always a 1. If there is a negative in front of x, but no number, it is a -1. Just recall that information from our previous example. So identify slope. This is, what number is that? That is m is equal to 1/3. And you're almost done. All you need to do now is graph your line. So here it is. I should be using a ruler, but I'm gonna pretend my lines are super duper straight. You should have a ruler in front of you. Okay, so here it is. Identify your y-intercept. So I'm gonna label these. These are 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 1, 2. I'm gonna go a little bit longer here. This is 3, 4, 5. And again, anything below the origin is negative. So -6, and this is positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is negative 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're gonna graph. Step number 1, you use first, then you do step number 2. So step number 1, identify your y-intercept. So here's our y-axis, here's our x-axis, okay? So on your y-axis, find this point, -5. So on my y, I see -5, -5, there it is. Give yourself a point. Now, using your slope, you're going to put your marker or pencil, on -5. This is a -5. So on -5, and then you're going to interpret what the slope is. So in my case, I have 1/3. So 1 is positive. So that means I go up, and then I look at the bottom number, which is positive, which means right. So that means my function is increasing. So I should get a line that looks like I'm going up a hill. Okay, so -5, now I'm going up 1. How do I know I go up? I go up 1. Keep your pencil there. Then I go right 3. So up 1, right 1, 2, 3. So here is my point. So y-intercept. Using my slope, I get 1/3. Here's my secondary point. And then how many points does it take to make a line? Only 2 points needed to make a line. Using your ruler, you're going to connect and you're going to graph this line, but you want this line to be pretty big. Don't give me a little tiny line. Also, you need arrows. Okay, this is a continuous line. It goes off to infinity and beyond in both directions. So you need to make sure you indicate that with arrows on both sides. Okay, all right, you guys, I'm going to wrap this up here. We're going to continue this later on in class. If you have any questions or if you noticed a mistake, please let me know. Again, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.